What happened on Cartoon Network in 2021? No, really, what happened? Because I'm struggling to come up with anything to talk about. As much as there are shows to look at and events to explore from the last 12 months of the checkerboard, I also get the nagging feeling that nothing much has changed. Am I onto something? I'm Benzie Johnson Jr., I'm enthusiastic about television, and let's find that out together. At the very least, let's reset the stakes. Cartoon Network, the once powerful animation juggernaut, has slumped into disrepair, turning away viewers, content, and, if 2020 was anything to go by, seemingly all common sense. Each year seems to get worse than the last, and it feels like the executives in charge of making decisions at CN are asleep at the wheel at best, and maybe actively rooting for destruction at worst. I'm not sure if we can go lower than the glimmers of creative hope lied out by the most hated animated series of the decade, and two shows that seem to spit in the face of any standard of storytelling itself. But given this is Cartoon Network we're talking about, I wouldn't put it past them. Well, assuming they actually do anything at all, that is. One place where Cartoon Network's inaction was still very notable was the state of the channel's schedule throughout 2021. While the days of Teen Titans Go's unquestionable domination of CN's 14 hours of airtime are over, ever since then it's largely been a duopoly, with TTG trading off airtime with The Amazing World of Gumball, a show that's been finished since 2019. Cricket the Creek has also now been getting an increasing amount of airplay this year, but not enough to threaten the apparent first and second fiddle CN still has. In fact, Gumball now airs more often than TTG, but the margins are so slight that it might as well be splitting hairs, and only really of relevance to network diehards, of which there are surprisingly many. For parts of the summer, Cricket the Creek actually managed more airings than Teen Titans Go, but only slightly, and both paled in comparison to the relative dominance of Gumball in that particular week's lineup. The fact that it's even remotely notable is a telling testament to just how long Cartoon Network has maintained the same dynamics with its schedule, and just how long this sort of scheduling has been failing them. This is a gross disservice to literally every other show CN has, basically fending for scraps of occasional appearances in inconsistent time slots for maybe a month at a time. No matter what I may actually think of the channel's content slate at this point, putting all of your shows into a position where they don't have the visibility they need to be successful is not just setting them up for failure, but also setting the network up for a needless uphill battle. And that's the last thing a channel in a position like CN's needs right about now. The challenges with CN's schedule aren't new, but every year I check back in and see that basically nothing's changed, I end up all the more disappointed in them. I can also be disappointed in them for burning things off, as that's what they did to the remainder of Bakugan Battle Planet at the start of the year. Smothered to death as it remained unmoved from its appalling time slot of Sunday mornings at 6:30 AM, the show finished in March with a 1-hour finale run. It's been a long while since Cartoon Network had any vested interest in toy-driven anime properties, especially since the rights for Pokemon moved to Disney XD several years ago. But like with the state of CN's schedule as a whole, these are basic, on-principle content treatment things that the channel just keeps not caring much about. And this is something that I found consistently ran through a lot of Cartoon Network's programming decisions in 2021. Another victim of that may just be new episodes themselves of CN's own original series. Throughout much of the year, premieres were largely hard to find among the endless reruns of the same few shows, and if I weren't keeping that close an eye on the channel, they'd be easy to miss. New episodes were hidden away for the most part in a Saturday morning block of premieres starting around 9 AM, which isn't necessarily a place I feel that works well. The tradition of Saturday morning cartoons, while it lingers in many minds, really died with the end of half-sibling The CW's swan song efforts ad in 2014, and the cable kids' big three have shown fickle and wavering commitments to that patch of airspace ever since, though Disney Channel has also been showing a renewed effort in re-establishing the slot this year. I'm not sure if Saturday mornings is a place where premieres resonates the same way with generations younger than mine, the kinds of audiences CN is now looking to court. Ratings for some of the premieres put into these slots suggest it's possible, or at least not measurably worse than placing them elsewhere, though that's hard to gauge with how low Cartoon Network rates, but it might be worth keeping an eye on in 2022.
Hi,
At the end of March came Elliot from Earth, a new series from the European CN team behind The Amazing World of Gumball. This was one of the few Cartoon Network series in recent years I was actually looking forward to watching, so imagine my lack of surprise when, with this being Cartoon Network we're talking about, it ended up being promoted and scheduled horrendously. It was thrown out on the middle of weekday mornings for a few weeks, admittedly near Easter break, and then never spoken of, much less rerun, again. Not to mention the mysterious slicing of the show's 20-episode order down to 16. Likely as a product of its bad scheduling, the series run rated poorly, starting at a week 151,000 and struggling to convincingly propel itself much higher. And that's a shame, because Elliot from Earth is honestly one of the best things Cartoon Network's come out with in the past few years. I wanted to give it a proper review and talk about it in detail, but I never got the chance before the end of the year. Maybe it's worth circling back to sometime. It's a bit of a hard watch for me, personally, because it starts from a very emotionally raw place. Elliot is struggling to make meaningful connections outside of, and given, the nomadic lifestyle of his mother, whose insistence on extraterrestrial discoveries has seen her laughed out of her scientific pedigree.
I'm taking my comics and my Stegosaurus because he said it was cool, but if he's not into dinosaurs, I got my rocket ship too and
Hey, slow down. You don't have to rush things.
Don't I?
What do you mean?
Well, we never stay anywhere long enough to get to know anyone.
In some ways, I have been Elliot before, and so watching him throw everything at the wall on the prospect of a new friend because he might not get the chance again cuts to the bone and hurts inside. His efforts, like those of his mother searching for scientific legitimacy the same day, are a failure, which hurts even more. In spite of their collective frustrations, they come together and end up on an unforgettable intergalactic adventure that neither of them will soon forget.
Besides, we're pretty good at moving, right?
Yeah, I guess we are.
It's hard to find anything not to like about this show. The storytelling is thoughtful and steadily paced. The art style, while on trend for Europe at the moment, is solidly modern and is able to take all the landscapes, happenings, and special effects that the show's ambitious premise can throw at it. If you haven't had a chance to see it, Cartoon Network has certainly made it hard to find since its premiere, but you're definitely missing out on a really solid animated adventure, even if its premiere was a heavily mangled mess. In April, Cartoon Network said its last goodbyes to the Ben 10 reboot, which had already faded into relative obscurity here but seemed to be a better international performer. After finishing Season 4 in the fall of 2020, the show played the old hits with 3 specials which saw crossovers with Generator Rex, similarly beloved among the older end of the franchise's fan base, and alternate universe Bens from the other earlier Ben 10 series. There's not much for me to say about this one, not least because I've never been invested in the Ben 10 universe, so this is mainly a posterity note. There were 3 specials that played old favorites for die-hard fans, which is admirable in some ways. Struggling for new content over the summer of 2021, Cartoon Network decided to pull on some vertically integrated strings and rope 2 shows they made for HBO Max last year into the lineup: Tig and Seek and The Fungies. I talked about both of these shows at length in separate reviews and in the 2020 Year in Review video, in which I outright castigated Tig and Seek for setting fire to character dynamics and bashed The Fungies for implying Cartoon Network was treating the bare minimums of storytelling as aspirational goals. Both shows' linear launches rated miserably too, languishing in the low to mid 100,000s range for the majority of their runs, bottoming out with one particular episode of each struggling to pull in 6 figures. Despite this, for inexplicable reasons, or at least the reasons the information we have doesn't justify, they decided to make 2 more seasons of both of these shows, dragging out Tig and Seek to Season 4 and The Fungies through 3 seasons. I'm not a fan of this practice when it was Nick bringing on Camp Coral and Rugrats from Paramount+, so I'm certainly not big on Cartoon Network shuffling HBO Max content onto the schedule. Streaming services themselves are bad places for originals, given the lack of visibility and promotional capacity baked into the design of these platforms. But this sort of second-run strategy, while it's a somewhat clever redistribution of resources, and theoretically gives more visibility to these series, smacks of lazy decision-making and cheapens the integrity of the channels themselves as distinctive and established brands, deserving of investment and original production in their own right, not just as dumping grounds for those unwilling to buy into the executive-driven idea that streaming is the future. Warner Media has been one of the most insistent at throwing all of their content eggs into the basket of their vertically integrated streaming service, HBO Max, and so this move is all the more grating and annoying in that context. While it is a salve for the visibility problem in the best interpretation, at its worst, it also feels like another group of corporate bean counters dead set on dividends, winning out against those willing to actually invest into the things that keep channels relevant. Investment was the one thing Cartoon Network seemed to be crying out for the most in 2021, though you could probably have said that about any of the last 5 years, to be completely honest. And not just any investment either, but sustained and successful investment. What that looks like exactly, Cartoon Network is yet to find out. But when you've slumped to a distant third place and you're trying not to look desperate, you're willing to admit you'll try anything. Cartoon Network tried to take us on this ride through introducing their new slogan and brand positioning, Redraw Your World. The new line was the first part of the outward manifestation of Warner Media Kids Department head Tom Ascheim's attempts to reinvent Cartoon Network as a multi-demographic kids TV powerhouse, not dissimilar from his earlier previous work doing much of the same for Nick. His main vows were to expand CN into a wider kids and family brand that went beyond cartoons and even the linear channel itself, being broadened, or reduced, into an important part of HBO Max. Ascheim made bold, daring promises: preschool, live action, co-viewing, welcoming girls, all of which have, in the past, dauntingly failed, either in kids TV more generally, in the case of the latter two, or on Cartoon Network itself, in the case of the former two. Aside from the slogan, one of the first fruits of that executive labor was unveiled on the morning of September 13th, when Cartoon Network didn't wake up like it usually did. Enter Cartoonito, the first time Cartoon Network has attempted a preschool programming block in 15 years. It's an American version of Warner Media's international preschool brand, which originally launched in the UK in 2006, and has had varying success in different regions since then. Only 2 other full-time and 2 block versions of it exist at this point, but I imagine the stage is being set for a global relaunch. This time, Cartoonito US is hoping not to be a repeat of the short life of Tickle U, which was aborted after 4.5 months at the start of 2006. It only has to make it to the end of January 2022 to outlive it, so we're not there yet. Even then, any suggestion that Cartoonito has been successful so far may be premature. Despite having a new Thomas & Friends reboot, controversially for the fanatics of the Train franchise, which surprisingly exist, and returning reruns of Caillou to US television after PBS had dropped it 9 months earlier after 2 decades of service, divisively for heirs of the Canadian show, which surprisingly exist. I mean, I don't follow preschool, I don't pay attention to these things. Ratings for the block have proven underwhelming. So, not too different from the rest of the network then. Ratings highlights of Cartoonito's first day include an airing of Caillou netting 167,000 viewers, but at the same time, multiple other shows, including that new Thomas & Friends series, not even cracking 6 figures. While Cartoonito's ratings were able to match a premiere on Disney Channel's Disney Junior block that morning, the full-time Disney Junior channel managed 218,000 viewers against the Thomas premiere, and even higher than that later in the day outside of Cartoonito's airtime. The battle in preschool kids TV is a heated one, with that demographic's big 3, Disney Junior, Nick Jr., and perhaps in Cartoon Network's absence, in a way, PBS Kids, fiercely battling for the eyes of an even more fickle audience and a wider range of viewing options than the 6 to 11 department that gets the bulk of the online coverage, at least unless there's a new preschool character to deride as annoying or simplistic. We ask for kids TV to not be marginalized and ghettoized, but then we turn around and punch down an even more marginalized segment. Funny how hypocrisy works. Though, seriously, there are people out there who give preschool fare much more analysis and respect than I'll ever be able to give it. Please give them your follows and support if you are interested in the ups and downs of the preschool space. With preschool competition as strong as it is, Cartoon Network's entry into the space brings a lot of potential and a lot of risk. The 2 existing cable preschool channels have managed to weather the overall slide in ratings amongst all of cable surprisingly well. We don't have numbers for the PBS Kids channel to compare with, but I imagine they're even stronger given its availability through broadcast stations. However, that doesn't mean that will translate into success for Cartoonito specifically, and effectively launching a new network, even as a block, will require a lot of time and investment, both things which are in short supply at Cartoon Network and amongst media executives in general these days. CN may not necessarily be that comfortable with waiting to build traction though, as the block's been cut back from 8 weekday hours, and 2 on weekends, to 7 and then 6 hours over the last few months of 2021. It's well worth keeping an eye on. Cartoonito may prove one of CN's most ambitious gambits, but it could also be one of their most disastrous. Following that, on the other side of the week, on September 19th, was Acme Night, a new Sunday evening programming block intended to spur family co-viewing, an elusive concept that Discovery Family, among others, has tried and failed to successfully capture in the modern era. For now, the 3 hours on Sundays from 6 to 9 p.m. are filled with movies, along with seemingly random, off-target filler the conglomerate has the rights to in the regular event that the movie doesn't fill all the airtime. But the intention is for the block to also be a home to a previously announced Harry Potter game show, because that's what the world's been asking for, and older skewing fare including the upcoming Unicorn Warriors Eternal. For now, Acme Night is still something of a novelty, as Cartoon Network fanatics make notes of things like swear words, sexual content, and even an entire episode of the classic sitcom Family Matters, out of nowhere, all air next to a CN logo bug. Whether or not it actually fulfills its mandate as a co-viewing destination, well, that's still up in the air. There's not too much to say about Cartoon Network's continuing series, though there were a decent number of them in 2021, almost in order of importance. Teen Titans Go finished Season 6 and entered Season 7 in 2021, stretching the comedy washing of the heroic franchise into its 8th year and beyond its 300th quarter hour. Laden this year with such weighty premises as patience, taxes, meta-commentary on animation production, and typefaces, the show continues to rate about as well as you'd expect for a television channel managing to take the long way down while circling the drain. After managing to crest 300,000 at the start of the year, the show slid through the 200s and into the 100,000s, bottoming out at 139,000 for a December episode. Craig of the Creek, fresh off their 100th episode at the end of 2020, continued through the rest of their 3rd season this year. The latest exploits from the youthful wilderness saw decent ratings. A springtime set of episodes fell within the 200,000s, ratings sank into the ones for an early June week of premieres, while a late June strip bomb special event notched 4 and even 500,000 viewers. 2 episodes starting Season 4 late in the year would bring Craig back to Earth. An October airing pulled 189,000 viewers, and a December premiere did 150,000 even. It seems like a strong performer, which is welcome in the face of the rest of the channel's uncertainty. Victor and Valentino, and their adventures in the still questionably pronounced Monte Macabre, finished their 2nd season in the spring and started their 3rd in the fall. Saturday premieres did not seem to treat this show well, even though 10:30 a.m. isn't that bad of a time slot. Ratings languished in the high 100,000s and low 200,000s, with the hour-long season finale only punching 178,000. Things didn't improve with the start of Season 3, and the range of around 150,000 became common, though a few errant new episodes on other nights in October and November certainly didn't help. The episodes on Tuesday, October 26th only managed about 70,000. There's still a lot of the season left to go, but things don't look good for the show beyond that. Apple and Onion finished the rest of its 2nd season this year. The 2 foods in the big city seem to have seen better days, if you ask me, though the show's erratic strip premiere airing schedule certainly didn't help their hopes. A first strip run in April seemed to do okay, though not outstanding, managing ratings in the mid to high 100,000s. Not awful for CN at this point, but not great either. The show's return in the last quarter of the year absolutely tanked, however. 4 of the 12 new episodes aired between October and December rated under 100,000 viewers, at a point when other premieres on the same days were rating much better relatively. Of the other 8, only 2, the episodes airing December 7th, rated north of 150,000. We now know as of February 2022 that the show has been cancelled, and with the way it went out, I can easily see why. Summer Camp Island is a show that seems to refuse to die, despite the absolute beating it's been through. In case you forgot, it premiered back in July of 2018 with a marathon burn of the show's first 20 episodes on a Saturday morning in the middle of the summer. The second half of that first season was burnt off on 5 consecutive bloody Sundays a year later. The show moved to HBO Max in 2020 and has never known peace since, with a 2nd and 3rd season pumped out, followed by 2 more in 2021. Seasons 3 and 5 were split up into, effectively, an anthology collection. We don't have numbers for how well the show's fared in the bombless pit of streaming, because those numbers are effectively a black box, but given how it was handled on the linear channel, I can't imagine it's beating the odds or anything like that. Though, speaking of Warner Media's bottomless pit of video, I guess I have to make some brief notes for posterity and completeness about some of the other things that went to HBO Max in 2021. Perhaps most prominent among them was the back half of Adventure Time Distant Lands, a set of 4-hour-long specials exploring news stories from the faces we know within the land of Ooo. It's hard to imagine that we'd see a small return to the universe a decade after the groundbreaking animated series made its mark on television at large, but it's easy to imagine that the executives at Warner Media would go through with it, given its enduring popularity and its status as one of the things most of us can agree on about Cartoon Network as a whole. I don't think anyone expected the channel to be such a mess by now, but that's a story for the rest of this video to tell. Critics took the specials fairly well, knowing how they were dripping in fan service and LGBTQ+ representation, though they also argued that they weren't as impressed with Wizard City from September 2021, about the former Peppermint Butler's return to magic, though they did note its welcome normalizing of gender nonconformity in day-to-day life. Wizard City was shoehorned onto production late, according to executive producer Adam Muto, after 2020's BMO, exploring that character's past, and Obsidian, about Marceline grappling with her romantic relationship with Princess Bubblegum, and May 2021's Together Again, touching on the death and rebirth of Finn and Jake. So perhaps that makes some sense in terms of execution. In general, Distant Lands did exactly the thing the executives want a rehash like it to do, and secondly, did exactly the sorts of things fans would want a rehash like this to do. The New York Times hailed Obsidian as the best excuse for HBO Max's existence, but if you need to make an excuse for it, maybe it doesn't have as much utility as some may insist it does. Over the summer, HBO Max popped into Jellystone, a reimagining of the characters of the erstwhile Hanna-Barbera studio as a community of townsfolk, and hijinks ensue from there. It's the first outing for this ensemble since the demise of the studio that birthed them, now long since absorbed into the various enterprises of Cartoon Network, and their first TV series in 30 years. Warner Bros. Animation picked a kids' TV veteran to handle the affair in C.H. Greenblatt of Chowder and Harvey Beaks fame. The show is intended as a new adventure with familiar characters, or somewhat familiar characters, as none of the profiles have been tweaked for cohesion or gender balance reasons. It's not something I'd personally give a lot of video coverage to, but I have heard that some of my fellow kids' TV content creators do enjoy the series. Running in October on the streamer was Aquaman King of Atlantis, a 3-part miniseries about the titled DC hero stepping up to the title job. I usually wouldn't go out of my way to bring up something like this. In general, I tend to stay out of covering large multimedia franchises, but King of Atlantis just so happened to be developed and co-executive produced by Victor Courtwright and Marley Halpern Grazer, whose most immediate previous work was the utterly panned, abject creative failure that was Thundercats Roar, which arrived in 2020, blew the lid off an outrage train, made me famous for about 2 seconds, and neatly died on its sword within the year. The art style of King of Atlantis makes the connection quite obvious, and the pair have suggested that this miniseries incorporates some of what they were hoping to put into Roar if it had a longer run. As for whether that works, well, on one side you've got apologetic animation reviewers, and on the other side you've got only the most bad faith of comic book hate-mongers. I was actually expecting it to be way more lopsided than it actually is. I'm not invested enough to take a side, so I'll defer to the videos out there from the likes of The Alpha J Show and Sarcastic Chorus, who made more full coverage content on this series. For all the space and attention that's been given to the channel's new direction and the 2 new programming blocks on the air, the truth of the matter remains that nothing's changed on Cartoon Network. The same problems concerning the same scheduling of the same shows exist, just compressed into 6 hours instead of 14. The same issues with CN's lacking content slate are still there, just obscured by the promotion of new Cartoonito premieres. The same questions I've had for the past few years about Cartoon Network's ratings and future viability are more glaring than ever, but fans and fan accounts are more interested in seeing the F word next to the Cartoon Network logo. Nothing has appreciably changed about Cartoon Network, its programming, or its schedule. The Amazing World of Gumball, Teen Titans Go, and Craig of the Creek still comprise the entirety of CN's airtime, and still in that same pecking order, just as they have for years previously. Cartoonito and Acme Night serve as little more than shiny distractions, covering up the real, structural problems with the channel and lulling viewers and fans into a false sense of confidence and optimism about the network's future. Cartoonito, in particular, could prove an intensive and messy diversion from building and improving CN, given the effort it'll take to make a fourth player in the preschool market even remotely viable. As notable as the redivision of CN's airspace is, for the main channel, it's more like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. If there is any executive will to save Cartoon Network from its own demise, radical intervention is imperative. It only makes logical sense that you can't enact change by doing the same things that already weren't working. But at Cartoon Network, it felt like sense, or at least real leadership, has been in short supply. And at this point, where ratings are continuing to sink through the 100,000s towards unsustainable numbers, and Warner Media's risky gambit of betting it all onto HBO Max has so far failed to produce the results the boardroom has been hoping for, leadership and change are two things Cartoon Network need the most right now. Year after year, Cartoon Network has failed to deliver and has stubbornly suggested through its inaction that there was no need to change course. But now it has gotten to a point of life and death for the channel so many continue to love. What happens when ratings sink under 100,000 viewers? When the revenue doesn't support new content anymore? When all of the cumulative mistakes of the past several years catch up with them? This channel seems not only unprepared, but ignorant of the realities that seem to be staring them right in the face. Nothing's changed at Cartoon Network, but soon, change may give them no choice. Hit subscribe for more analysis like this and the rest of the annual retrospective series. You can support these videos further and get exclusive bonuses at benj.tk/join. Back in 2020, Cartoon Network seemed unwilling to help themselves. You can watch that look back up here or down in the description. I'll see you next time.